Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third lecture in the 2020 Last Lecture series. Thank you guys so much for joining us on Tuesday and Wednesday to hear from Professor Umunna and Professor Renan. We're extremely excited today to have the distinct honor of having Professor Okediji join us to speak today. And before we hand that off, I'm just, quick logistics like we do every day. So we will have Professor Okediji's remarks, followed by a question and answer period. The remarks will be recorded, but the Q&A will be off the record. So feel at ease to ask questions. For questions, use the raising hands function, the chat, or message myself or Professor Okediji privately if you want it to be anonymous. So with that, I'll hand it off to Casey to get things rolling. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, Professor Okediji, and everyone for joining us today. I'm Casey, one of the class of 2020 class marshals, and it's a distinct honor to introduce Professor Okediji. I first saw Professor Okediji speak as a 1L at the WLA Shatter the Ceiling Awards when she was presented with the Faculty Award for the second time, honoring excellence in advancing equity in the classroom and inclusivity and mentorship. Her impressive record of scholarship in international intellectual property law seemed only matched by her warmth, charisma, and caring demeanor. I knew I wanted to take a class with her before I graduated. Luckily, I was given the opportunity to take intellectual property with her this fall. I learned that the treaty that means the most to her is the World Intellectual Property Organization Marrakesh Treaty to promote access to published works for visually impaired persons. She was a lead negotiator and senior expert for 54 countries in the negotiations to ensure that the world would have a treaty guaranteeing disabled persons access to copyrighted works. While drafting and negotiating IP treaties is what most people know her for, contracts is her stated true passion. In class, not only did Professor Okediji generously share her wisdom on IP and innovation policy, but she also arranged to have cookies and berries with whipped cream for us as a mid-afternoon treat every week. Professor Okediji is the foremost authority on the role of intellectual property in social and economic development and a wonderful professor and role model to many students. Professor Okediji, we're so looking forward to hearing from you today. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, class of 2020. Thank you for honoring me with this invitation to deliver one of the last lectures. I am so honored, and I can't express that enough. This is an especially meaningful invitation for me because you, this unbelievable class, this class that I describe as uncommon, you, the class of 2020, are my first full generation of HLS graduates. I started with you on August 30th, 2017. I had accepted the position of being the Jeremiah Smith Junior Professor of Law. I joined the ranks of the tenured faculty earlier in 2017, and I showed up almost as wide-eyed and nervous as many of you did. Many of you refer to me as Mama O, and it's a title that I bear proudly. You have shared with me your triumphs, your sorrows, your fears and hopes, and your dreams. You've invited me into the secret and sometimes sacred aspects and chambers of your lives. You've asked me to walk with you as you've planned out classes, as you planned out your semesters, your summer jobs, and now as you plan your lives after law school. I've met boyfriends and girlfriends and fiancés and children and husbands and wives and all kinds of friends. I've prayed some of them in, and I've had to pray some of them out with you. We've broken bread together. We've had breakfasts and lunches and dinners. We've had office hours that have been punctuated with laughter, with tears, with distress, with prayer, lots of prayer. I've prayed for so many of you. And now here we are, 2 years, 8 months, 13 days later. This day has come. How do you even feel? I can't imagine how you are taking it all in. And as much as I try, and despite the joy that I have and the joy that I feel, that this day has come, let me tell you that I will miss you. I will miss your passion, your intensity. I will miss the days when my office hours stretch long because we're debating arcane details in a case. I will miss every part of this vivacious, visionary, distinctive class. Every class is different. Every class individually and collectively, each of you bring with you your own adventure, and yours is one that I've thoroughly enjoyed. I've had the sheer delight in getting to know you, and I've tried in vain to stop many of you from going on international trips when I was nervous that you would get killed or wouldn't come back safely. And I have stayed on my knees those trips time and time again. And time again, you've proven to me and to others that you get this thing called justice. You get it. This end goal and this purpose that I hope and pray will shape the entirety of the rest of your lives. And it's true that you don't have to be a lawyer to do justly. Being a lawyer isn't a requirement for people to do just things. But I will tell you, class of 2020, that being a lawyer makes justice your unavoidable calling. It's unavoidable for you. Being a lawyer gives you tools and skills and a capacity to influence not just one case, not just one moment in time, but entire systems and institutions, and yes, even entire nations. And I know that today I am speaking to future senators and congresspeople and presidents and prime ministers. I know that I'm speaking to a graduate class that will be filled with leadership for tomorrow. But most importantly, giving you a legal degree, giving you an education in the law will give you opportunities. It will give you a dedication to seeking justice, because you see, a dedication to seeking justice needs the skills and the tools to bring justice to someone's doorsteps. Because, you know, justice can be this abstract and distant and unreachable thing, and a justice that's distant, a justice that isn't really experienced and encountered, is really no justice at all. Being Harvard Law School students mean that you have the opportunity, not just one, but many opportunities to bring justice closer to many. This is the gift that the law school has given you. It's an infinite variety and diversity of opportunities to do something that will affect one and many. You arrived here in 2017 just as the law school was celebrating its bicentennial. You stepped into 200 years of history. A daunting history full of legendary figures whose stories not only indelibly shaped the school, but that defined the legal profession and that profoundly shaped a nation and continues to do so. You stepped into history, and in so doing, you began this slow, steady, inexorable march to your own futures. Today, you're transitioning from the cocoon of what has been a home of sorts for 3 years, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes leaving you hungry for something more, sometimes making you weary of the relatives that you have to live with day by day. But nonetheless, it's been home. Many of you will agree that you are leaving this place changed. Although you arrived at Harvard Law School as adults in some way already formed by experiences, the truth is your future is going to be distinctly affected by what you're taking away from here. Even if you don't feel different, you will be different. And even if you don't think you're different, people will presume that you are different. You're not just going to be Oladeji or Julian Nunali or Yemi or Brooke Justice. You're not going to be just Kennedy or Camille or KC or Jennifer. You're not just going to be Penny or Nick or Nicholas or Rose or Baum or Jacob. You're going to be someone with a mark on your name. You'll be the one that went to Harvard Law School. They'll point you out in a crowd. People will watch you to see whether you behave different, whether you eat different or even walk different. For better or worse, you're going to attract attention. A raised eyebrow, oh, and they went to Harvard? Greater acknowledgements, higher expectations, you'll have automatic prestige or immediate resentment. You see, you carry on your backs those 200 years, you carry on your backs the burden of Harvard's history. And yet you carry on your chest, you wear this badge of its future as well. Your pathway from here on out will add to the story that Harvard Law School is. So what are you going to do? How shall you then live? To be clear, let me say that arriving here in 2017 was in some ways not very different from arriving here in 1843. From the diaries of Rutherford Hayes, who later became the 19th president of the United States, we still find striking similarities. He wrote, "I have now finished my first week at Harvard Law School. I've studied hard, and I wonder if I made a mistake." And many of you in those first few weeks thought that, you asked that. And about 7 weeks into law school, President Hayes was cold called on for the first time. And he wrote in his diary, "I was poorly prepared and my success was in keeping with my preparation." And many of you have experienced that as well. We all remember that feeling of being cold called and not feeling prepared and feeling like we did a terrible job. And just in case you wondered if this really was HLS in 1843 still, if you wonder if in fact the president had walked through these halls and taken these classes, he wrote in February, and all of you remember February's. He said, "It was cold today and it rained and it snowed. Welcome to Harvard Law School. Welcome to the New England winters, the infamous New England weather." So you survived 1L and 2L and 3L year. You survived the New England stormy weather. You survived Ames and LRW and many, many cold calls. You are leaving a campus that is familiar, a routine that you know as intimately as your next breath. And the question is, what will hold your collective and your individual futures together? What is the thing that will hold you, that will hold the bits of knowledge that you've learned in your time here? What will tie together the cases, the clinics, and the causes that you took up and that you took on while you were in law school? What's going to anchor you in the privilege that is Harvard while you strive to define what it will mean to you in your own life? Because make no mistake about it, class of 2020, you're not just graduating, you are transitioning from being students into becoming lawyers. And there's so much that I could add to what your professors have already shared with you. I could say the first thing that I always say, which is have faith. What will you believe in? What will determine the rest of your life and all of eternity for you? Because if you don't have a faith, you should seek one and find one and make it your faith. Anchor your life in some immutable truths and some unshakable convictions. I could tell you what I tell you next often in my classes: work hard. I could tell you to be diligent and to prioritize your family and your personal relationships. I could say be true to yourself. Do good to others and exercise self-restraint. Be someone that people can depend on. Remember that a good name is better than riches. So be a person of integrity. Believe in something that doesn't depend on you. Find what you love and pursue it. And all of these things you have heard before, but I want to spend a little bit of time on this last one. There'll be no cold calls today. This is, after all, my last lecture to you, and I will make it a lecture. You see, I believe you should find what you love and pursue it. But I want to caution you, it takes more than loving something. Many of you have loved things in the past, and you have left them behind. Many of you will find yourself working on cases or in firms or in areas of law that are really different from what you thought you would be doing. For many of you, you may not have found that one topic or subject or area that makes your heart skip a beat. Perhaps you never have hugged an IP case like I have. Or maybe you've never written a poem about a contracts casebook like I once did. If you can't love it now, be committed to it. Choose to be committed when you can't love. Choose to be committed to whatever you're doing and do it well. Whatever your hands find to do, do it well. Because people and nations and communities are counting on you. But I guarantee you, class of 2020, there will be something that you will love, something that will compel you, that will capture your attention, that will become the fuel for your life's journey. And in general terms, this should be the same thing for all lawyers. So what is that thing? In 2017, when you arrived at Harvard Law School, Dean Manning was just beginning his first year as dean. And you too are his first full 3-year class. And in your welcome address, Dean Manning said, he emphasized, he said, it's an important time to be a lawyer. And he said that good lawyers are indispensable for the contributions they make to law and to justice. Justice, this idea that governs our understanding of how people are treated or what is owed to people. It comes from the Roman law, and in the 6th century, as far back as then, we see it being defined as this constant, perpetual, insistent decision and commitment to render to each person what is right, what is due to them. And all of you, regardless of what area of law that you work in, regardless of what you are doing, you will find opportunities. And ultimately, you will be faced with these constant questions about how to solve issues and how to answer hard questions, how to improve social institutions so that each person can have their due. Many of you came to law school with a sense of justice. You came with certain moral failures that stirred your heart, that stirred your mind, certain causes that seemed to call out more loudly to you than it did anybody else. And yet, learning the law is not enough, is it? You're ready to graduate, aren't you? You are ready to get out there and to do something. And what you want to do is something that is good, that is meaningful, that brings justice to the doorsteps of someone, that brings justice closer to a people, to a nation, to a community. So how do you get there? How do you get there? Let me offer a few insights from my own journey, a journey that is still unfolding, but I hope that these lessons will help you get on your path and will help you stay on your path. Number one, looks are deceiving. Looks are deceiving. See, I never dreamed of being a lawyer. For many of you, you woke up, you came out screaming and squalling as babies, squalling for justice, and you haven't stopped since. But I never dreamed of being a lawyer, and how I got here is a miracle. But when I started my pre-law journey, I would have thought that human rights or civil rights or constitutional law or torts were subjects that would most appeal to me. See, because my nickname in high school was "It's Not Fair." That was my first retort to everything. But that's just not fair. That's just not right. And so when I had to write an undergraduate paper in my pre-law journey, I went to a professor of mine that I knew well, and I said, I have to write this paper and I don't know what to write on. And he said to me, go to my office. I just came back from a conference. There's a stack of papers there. Read them and see if anything in there stirs you. And I thought, okay. And I did that. And those stack of papers changed my life. They were papers on the role of patents and technology transfer in transforming nations from agrarian societies into industrialized societies. There were papers about the importance of innovation and the importance of building a knowledge society. They changed my life. For 3 days, I did not leave my room. I pored over these papers. My mind was expanded. Now, I guarantee you, if that professor had said to me, there are a stack of intellectual property papers from a conference I just attended, go read them, I would have said, no, thank you. Looks can be deceiving. Since that fateful day, since that fateful weekend where I locked myself up and read 300 pages about patents and the technicalities and the global dimensions of them, I have worked with governments since that day, and I've worked with international organizations and civil society groups. I've gone worldwide doing teaching and training about how technology affects the potential for human development. I've debated the risks of technology, its virtues, its limits. I've fought with presidents and prime ministers and ambassadors and politicians around the world, asking them, imploring them, demanding that they make the right choices in IP policies that will affect whether students can afford books for school, that will affect whether citizens can afford life-saving drugs. Who would have thought that IP law would get me there? Who would have thought that this stack, this 300-page stack of technical papers that most of my friends looked at and said, yuck, who would have thought that it would take me to the forefront of human rights and civil rights and equality and constitutional law? all of the things that we are fighting about today and debating in our technologically driven society revolve around this subject. So I want to encourage you that, as one of my favorite prophets in the Bible declares, there are streams in the desert. Class of 2020, there are roads in wildernesses. There are things to be discovered. Don't be fooled by the experiences. Don't be fooled by what things look like. Don't let the look of a case, don't let the size of a client, don't let the appearances decide for you. Don't judge on just one encounter. Be willing to look behind the cover of the proverbial book. Cultivate the courage to try something new. Second thing, even one person, one case, one person is worth it. One person is worth it. I love this story in the Bible about a shepherd who leaves 99 and goes after one sheep that gets lost. We have to be this persistent about justice. We have to be this persistent about finding solutions so that people can get what is their due. I mentioned earlier the 200 years of history that you stepped into when you arrived at Harvard Law School. I've heard many of you say that sometimes Harvard Law School can be a burden. It's true. I get it. And as I said before, as an HLS graduate, sometimes you are more of an exhibit than you are a person. People will treat you different and expect these unimaginable things from you. That's true. But I want you to know that some burdens are worth it if you learn how to carry them. Now, many of you in your journey through HLS, you've passed through Hemingway Gym. Maybe some of you woke up every day or came to school every semester promising yourself you'd get to Hemingway, and you never made it in the 3 years you've been here. Maybe you went to another gym. Maybe you're still dreaming, okay, when I'm done with the bar, I will start this thing. But here's the point. My point is, if you did get to the gym, you hopefully lifted some weights. Why did you do that? To build muscle. Class of 2020, your journey is going to require muscle. This is how justice happens. Justice is persistent. It requires insistence and the careful lifting of historical weights, the weighing of measures that define who people are, that define the pathway for a particular cause or case. For some of you, your weights may comprise the 50-pound bench press of leading institutions or of running for political office. For some of you, it may be a 15-pound weight that will tone your arms to craft that national policy, that community policy, that law, that legislation that is so necessary to right or wrong. For some of you, it may be the 10-pound weight of a pro bono case that will set a prisoner free, that will right a wrong. Whatever your weight is, carry it well. It will build muscle for the journey ahead. It doesn't matter whether your work will impact one person, whether you are doing it in the shadows of a small firm or of a public interest organization or a civil society organization. It doesn't matter that it's one person or one case or one line in a statute that needs to go. It is worth the journey you have endured at HLS. Casey mentioned the Marrakesh Treaty, which is a treaty that facilitates access to published works that are copyrighted for disabled people. And prior to that treaty, if you were visually impaired, it was difficult for you to go to law school. It was difficult for you to go to any school. And this was a burden for me as a copyright scholar, and I struggled with this. And so when I was asked to help do this work and to conduct these negotiations, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would be sitting around these tables in Morocco and in Geneva and in London doing all these things. And it sounds fancy, but it was just a hotel room with a bunch of lawyers sitting around a table fighting over this treaty and whether or not visually impaired persons would have access to materials, whether they would be able to go through school, whether they would be enabled and empowered to live their best lives despite the disability. And we finally got that treaty done. And I heard from Stevie Wonder and so many people that we think of as icons who have struggled because of a disability. And I was so grateful to God for that opportunity. And I actually, frankly, didn't think much of it. I was just glad that it was done. And I was hopeful that countries would take it and that it would transform the lives of people. Well, on August 30th, 2017, your first day of law school at 8 o'clock, I showed up in my contracts class. I talked about offer. and acceptance and consideration. We didn't quite get to consideration, but we were going there. And at the end of that lecture, one of your colleagues walked up to me. He said, Professor Okediji, you don't know me. You don't know my name. You don't know who I am. But I was able to read 3 volumes of Montesquieu this summer for the first time because of the Marrakesh Treaty. I'm a 1L in your class, and I want to thank you. In my wildest dreams, when I was frustrated and angry and getting to my wit's end, when I thought it just wasn't worth it, and we should just walk away, that the established interests were just too entrenched in the copyright system, that we would not get this done. And in fact, I had uttered those words at the beginning, this is unlikely to happen. When I looked into my 1L student's face, I almost wept. He was worth it. He was worth it. And today, he is a proud member of the class of 2020. The third thing that I want to leave with you, class of 2020, is look at the right things. Look at the right things. You know, the situation that we are in is concerning on so many levels, and there's so much global uncertainty. And I have had to have occasion to call on a verse that says in Philippians 4:8, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are good, whatever things are pure and right, think and meditate on these things. Many of you have spent a lot of time in the 3 years of law school finding and fighting injustice. When people ask you why, you might say, but look at all the injustice in the world. My typical response is, I don't need to look for it. It stares me in the face every single day. I see it when I travel to Europe, and I am still refused service in a restaurant because I'm Black. I see it when I walk into a boardroom to represent the president of a country or presidents of many countries, and the first question that greets me is, could you bring us coffee? I see it in the newspapers as men are shot down in cold blood and in broad daylight for the singular offense of being a different color. I see it in jailhouses that are full of young people whose lives might be different if as a country we had a pathway for both accountability and redemption. Injustice is everywhere. And that's why, class of 2020, justice must be persistent. But if all you look for and if all you find is injustice, if that's what motivates you, you'll always be in pain or angry or paralyzed with fear. But worse, if injustice is what you see most of the time, you won't recognize justice. You won't find and fight the battles that are the most important. You see, finding injustice is just easy. That's why we have so much of it. People examine it, they find it, then they imitate it. So much so that injustice becomes our default. Justice becomes less recognizable, less feasible, less probable, less imaginable, less impossible. When we look and find and live in the place of injustice all the time, we lose hope for justice. So today, class of 2020, I want to encourage you to be persistent in finding and in securing justice. You must know the persistence of justice, because if injustice is everywhere, you might be tempted to think that justice is nowhere. And if justice is nowhere, you have just spent 3 years of your life. The lifeblood of the law is justice, persistent justice. Fourth thing that I want to leave with you, I only have 6, so we're almost done. The fourth thing I want to leave with you is a proverb. And this is, of course, an African proverb. It's a West African proverb. It's a Yoruba proverb. It says that when you are crying, you can still see. You know, it's always important to look back. Wise King Solomon said the end of a matter is better than its beginning. And I've always wondered why, because personally, I'm a new beginnings kind of girl. I love the excitement of the unknown. I love the freshness of new experiences, the hope that there's something better ahead. But recently I got a glimpse into this truth that the end of a matter can be good. I mean, to be honest, doesn't it feel good today to be at the end of your law school journey? Don't you feel accomplished? Don't you know more, or maybe know less? But you know, you feel like you've done something, and the end allows you to put things in perspective. It allows you to judge with more facts in hand. It allows you to reflect on what you did right and what you did wrong, or what you didn't do at all. There's always something about the end that makes the new beginning possible. But endings are tough. And of course, this is a tough ending for you. The world is beset by a pandemic, one that is still unfolding, that is still to be defeated. In a few short months, it has upended our life as we know it. It's marked your class. And many would argue that it's maybe redefined you. But I beg to differ, and I hope that you will too, because you see those 200 years that I talked about that you stepped in unknowingly and unwittingly perhaps, in the journey that you are about to leave behind, now 203-year journey, even the one that you're about to start and embark upon, there are buried histories of many plagues. Plagues that some of you have read about, you've studied and confronted in your courses. They're plagues that have marred generations past, and their consequences and scars are still etched in the hallways of this university and of this nation. They are like the marks that smallpox would leave on a generation ago when smallpox could not find a cure for it. We find the scars of those plagues in our society and our world, and we describe them as plagues because they bear doom on their wings, right? They exact a toll on our daily lives. They compel us to rearrange and to reimagine the ordinary routines of life. They are a burden around which we navigate or zoom around. We are forced to abandon habits and to adapt to new inconveniences. We're disappointed and we're fearful. We grapple with lots of emotions when we have a plague. But class of 2020, the emotions will come and they will go. They'll come back. So the point is not the pandemic or the plagues, the point is you. You see, the reason COVID-19 and like any other large-scale challenges that may follow, the reason it fiercely grips our attention is that the consequences are visible and often they are immediate. We're inundated with the news of its spread and how many people have died and its devastation every day. But as I reminded one audience recently, there are things far more stubborn and far more persistent and far more debilitating than this pandemic. There are the injustices and the pain that pervade the fabric of our families and our relationships in our society. There are attitudes and actions and beliefs that maim us, that weaken us, that divide us, that poison us, that diminish us, and that ultimately destroy the things that are most important for life. These things are buried in the news, and sometimes they're not reported at all, or sometimes they just become part of the fabric of life, and we are used to them. But when we're crying over the current plague, I want us to remember that we still need to look and remember the plagues past and the lingering consequences and the ongoing plagues that are buried below the headlines. I want to challenge you, because these older plagues that we often lose sight of in the face of the current one, they share lots of things in common with COVID-19. We often don't know when we have contracted them. We don't know how we infect others with these attitudes and with these mindsets. And we so often quickly run out of protective gear. We run out of the protective gear of forgiveness. We run out of the protective gear of hope and trust and grace and love. So I want to challenge you as you pack up your books and bags, as you look toward a future that seems uncertain. I want you to look hard at what you've encountered in this pandemic, how you've responded, and I want to remind you that you want to keep looking beyond it and you want to look before it. Let your vision give you some insight into what you believe and how firmly you continue to press into those causes that are so vital for justice to occur in our country. Make sure that what you believe and that your faith is strong enough to sustain you, because when the fight for justice is long, it can also be lonely and unrewarding. So when you're looking, when you're crying now about the things that have happened in the last 3 months and 2.5 months, I want you to remember that there are still lingering plagues and pandemics that we must not lose sight of, that still must be fought. And the fifth thing is take art lessons. This one has been really important, and it's been hard because I am not an artist. See, disagreement and division are not conjoined twins. They're not inevitable partners. It's true that disagreements are unavoidable. Despite being the class of 2020, let me just tell you the truth. You don't have perfect vision. You will need others in your life that can help you adjust your lens, or maybe just to clean them so that you can see better. Disagreement, the art of healthy disagreement, is one of the skills you have to learn to preserve relationships, from your most casual relationship to your most intimate relationship. Now, again, there's nothing unavoidable about disagreement and division. I mean, there's nothing unavoidable about division. You can disagree. In fact, disagreement is a sign of healthy independence. It's part of life's journey. But the point of disagreement is not to be divided. The point of disagreement is to train your mental and your emotional faculties so that you can identify ways to reconcile things. And you've done this for 3 years in law school classes where you've had to reconcile competing precedents that were in tension, maybe even conflicting precedents. It is a way to better complete yourself when you know the art of disagreement. You are better as a person. You are more complete by having people in your life who are not like you, who have walked a different road in life, who've made choices that you would have never made, and who find themselves in situations that you would never imagine. Healthy disagreement is an art. Take art lessons. No matter how talented you are, you're going to need those lessons. So make a commitment to engage with difference intentionally, with compassion, and with conviction. You see, the best artists, they don't paint exactly what they see. No. They add their own interpretation. They bring new hues and textures to what most of us might think is mundane and dull. Artists reinvigorate the new. They add fresh and unusual perspective. So bring your best self to a disagreement and be open to what the other person's best self is trying to show you. Be committed from the very beginning to seeing what they see, even if you don't like the paint color that they choose, or you are perplexed by the object that they seem so passionately engaged with. The comma at the end of the sentence, or the period at the end of the sentence, and the comma that separates the clauses. People get worked up about this in firms. And you may be befuddled about these things, but bring your best self in, because disagreement and distrust, disagreement and division are not inexorable. They're not natural allies. If you allow disagreement to amount to distrust, you give license to allow every disagreement to breed and moral growth. Okay, my last tool for your suitcase: unmute yourself. You know, I often find myself in situations where I'm the only woman or I'm the only person of color on a team. And in those situations, I'm pretty conscious of the importance of listening closely, speaking when I have something to say, and to be honest, sometimes I'm also alert to the possibility that my voice won't be heard. So recently, I was involved in a high-stakes negotiation with a significant, a number of economic and political consequences. And I was surrounded by an astonishingly good team of lawyers. I had spent hours preparing. I felt ready. I felt good. I was a senior legal expert, and I felt confident that I was representing the right side of the story. And so we all dialed into the conference call on time, and we were waiting for the call to begin. And the conversation began, and I listened closely. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes. And then I had a thought. I had a response to a point that had been fairly compelling and that had been really made quite powerfully. And so I cleared my throat and I started to speak, only to be interrupted by someone. So I kept quiet and I waited for the person to conclude his point. And then I began to speak again. And again, I was interrupted. And I said, "Excuse me, may I have the floor to make this intervention? I've been trying to speak." But this speaker just ignored me and went right on speaking. My moment was gone. I'd lost my point. I was mildly irritated, but I said, okay. An hour into the conversation and many points later, I still had not been able to speak. And by then, class of 2020, by then, my mild irritation had turned to steam. I mean, imagine those cartoon creatures with fumes coming out of there. That was me. That was me. I was sufficiently aggravated. I was so aggravated, but I missed the last 30, 45 minutes of the conversation because I was starting to imagine in my mind the conversations that I was going to have when this conference call was over. I was going to call some people. We were going to have a talk because I wanted to make it clear to my colleagues that I wouldn't be silenced, that they couldn't treat me as lesser just because I'm a woman or a person of color. And I'm telling you, class of 2020, those conversations in my mind were good. They were good. 2 days after the call, a member of the legal team called me and said, Professor Okediji, why didn't you speak during our conference call? We were waiting to hear from you. And so, you know, I waited, as I've learned to do in life. I took a deep breath and I said, this poor person is just the messenger. I'm not going to go off on them. Let me just walk in love here. And so I took a deep breath and I said, I did try to speak multiple times. But each time that I opened my mouth, someone interrupted me. And even when I asked that they let me finish, they just ignored me. It was the most disrespectful call that I have been in a long time. And I won't participate in such a call again. We need to have a conversation about this going forward. There was dead silence on the other end, maybe for about 2 minutes. And finally, this very senior lawyer said, Professor Okediji, did you press *6? I said, what? He said, *6, to unmute yourself. In the blink of an eye, class of 2020, my racist, sexist, disrespectful, rude colleagues were transformed once again like Wonder Woman used to do, and they became normal, kind people, and I became the villain. You see, by dialing into the call, I had automatically muted myself. It was my responsibility to unmute myself. I had the power, the means, the opportunity. My voice, even if not wanted, was invited and even necessary. So as you leave Harvard Law School, class of 2020, I encourage you to unmute yourself. Identify those things that unknowingly keep you silent when your friends or your family or your community around you need your voice. It could be fear, it could be apathy, it could be pride, it could be blindness to the world and the needs around you. It could be blind ambition and self-absorption. Because when you're muted, you're only talking to yourself. You imagine conditions and motivations that may not exist. You ascribe ill will to others without ever once stopping to examine yourself. Self-examination is crucial for your ability to unmute yourself and to contribute to the many conversations around you, to make your voice count persistently and insistently in the cause of justice. Martin Luther King Jr. loved this verse in Amos 5:24, let justice roll down like a river and righteousness like a never-failing stream. Your voice is a tributary to that river of justice. So class of 2020, I salute you. And I bless you and I congratulate you. And like arrows that have been sharpened, I release you to persist in the cause of justice. Find your mark and hit it. And don't forget that those of us you've left behind are a part of your tomorrow. Congratulations, class of 2020. I'm excited for you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.